Hello, everyone. Welcome to this live stream. I'm really excited to share with you some information so that you can totally change your relationship with food. Now, usually I say that food and feminine energy go together, but for today, I am going to share with you a little bit more from the Jungian Carl Jung depth psychology perspective, because that is really going to give you some insight into how the energy systems in your body are working. By the end of this live stream, you have tools so that you can change your relationship, whatever type of crime and punishment story you have, whatever kind of really horrible self-talk that you have based on what you're eating or what you're not eating. Welcome to my channel. My name is 𝗲𝗏𝘁. I've been in fitness since 2001, and I incorporate energy work into your eating and your exercise. And if you find value in this live stream, I forgot all about my mug that says Body Energetics. I made this a few years ago. And then I also have a water bottle for all you gym girls, and it says Body Energetics. And this is the dragon, and she is holding the heart chakra from brain and heart coherency breathing. And my dragon's name is Aurora, in honor of the Aurora tattoo that I have on my arm. So if you find value in this live stream on Facebook or on YouTube, tag me when you share so that I can enter you into a drawing that will be launched on September 8th when we launch round 2 of the Fat Life, my exclusive coaching container that helps you process, heal, align, and transcend all your limiting beliefs so that you can get healthy, happy, and hot. So if you find value, please give us a share, give me a share, tag me in the post, and then I will enter you into the drawing to win one of those of your choice. So let's get into the live stream. So first of all, the Jungian psychology is so awesome because it's going into the deep underbelly, the full unconscious of like all of us. And I've been reading so many books that like one of them goes all the way back to the Stone Age to really get a comprehensive look of like why we are in society the way we are, and what is the belief in the higher power. How are people believing that something outside of themselves can either take them out, but we're all going to die anyway, and then what outside of ourselves can be the solution and be our savior. I really love everything that I've come across, especially the Jungian depth psychology perspective, because there is a correlation between how feminine and masculine energy within each person shows up or is repressed in society. And one of the things that Carl Jung has said is that the masculine energy, the order, and the achievement, the boundaries, like all of those things are actually what build culture in which society lives in. And I was like, oh my God, this is perfect, because how many times have I even said, and how many times have other women said, FUCK to the man, to diet culture, to the marketing industries that have constantly told us that we had to be skinny to be valuable. That is a perfect representation of what the masculine energies kind of role is within our life experience. And so if you really start to look at this as a psychological perspective, that if we just look at diet culture as this container or a framework of a mindset, and the masculine creation, or like the masculine evolution of culture, of society, where there is order, where there is, hey, you really shouldn't pick your nose in public, or you shouldn't pick your butt in public, like where we have certain things that we're not supposed to do, that we're supposed to keep behind closed doors. Well, the thing with the evolutionary psychology perspective of that is that the suppression can get categorized into just suppressing your feelings. And we all know that gets us nowhere, because if we're suppressing our feelings, especially the negative ones, then either our shadow, the parts of us that we are ignoring, are going to act and create drama in our lives. They're just going to repeat situations that we downloaded in that ages of 0 to 7 when we were learning how to be human. Or our ego is going to come into play to protect the feelings of the shadow. And the ego is just putting on all these rules and restrictions and, making sure that you follow directions and all those types of things. So when we can look at it from that perspective, and then we can actually look at how we feel about ourselves as a woman, with our body, with the function of it, what it can do, and what society has said our worth is because of the shape that we're in. So if we look at it from that perspective, then we can say, okay, let me put on my Jungian psychology hat here and get really rational with myself and really notice how it is that I feel about my body, especially when I'm bloated, especially when I feel my jeans get tight, especially when you can see impressions on your body because you're bloated and you're like, oh my God, this is the worst. How do we actually feel about ourselves in those moments? And then what immediately, from the Jungian perspective of the masculine energy that creates culture, what immediately what diet immediately goes off in your head? I need to cut back on salt. I need to cut back on carbs. I should be on paleo. I should be on carnivore. I should really recommit to my multi-level marketing shake protocol. Like, we have a whole list of masculine culture in the form of diet culture rules go off. So if you can start to play with that, if you can start to play with the concept of creating a growth relationship with your food versus whatever the hell it is right now, then it's going to be so much easier for you to do the following steps. And so, just to reiterate, this opening part about Jungian depth psychology is that we're really applying that the masculine energy of order, authority, becoming, achieving what is appropriate in society, that's all masculine energy. That's its role. The feminine is the intuition, the instinct, a lot of the creativity, and a lot of the evolution. Because if you're looking at it from a feminine energy and feminine body perspective and really looking how there's correlations to that, a woman's body is changing every single day with her hormones, with her cycle. Her senses are heightened when she's pregnant so that she can really spot danger from really far away to make sure the baby growing in her belly is alive. So the woman body, the feminine energy, as a symbol of it, is the thing that's kind of like having the spidey senses to be like, this part of culture has kind of run its course. So, what can we create now? And that's what I really want you to think about when you're going into changing this relationship with your food, because it is so hard because there is so much self worth attached to it. So that's kind of your umbrella to think about these next few topics that I want to introduce to you, and then share with you the actionable steps that you can take today to change your relationship with food to a growth relationship. The insidious nature of quote unquote food made in a lab and its addictive effects on the reward center of the brain. So here's the thing. So many times, this is before body positivity movement. This is before Ozempic. This is before microdosing GLP-1s. Way back before then, I would talk with clients and they would rebel against the man, the diet culture that says I have to look a certain way to be loved, because that's pretty much the marketing message with all of our diets. And the response to that is, I'm going to eat whatever I want. I'm going to eat my Cheetos. I'm going to eat my Doritos. I'm going to eat my chocolate. And that would all be fine if it was like the 1950s, because at that time we were eating more real food. It was kind of around the 50s that then we started to get the hydrogenated oils. And we got the hydrogenated seed oils because it was actually used to lubricate machines, and scientists started playing around with it and they were like, you know, if you change the consistency of it, it can really tolerate a lot of heat to fry our food in. And it's cheap as hell. Yes, let's market it. And so we really have had almost an entire 100-year period of us eating fake food. America is so unhealthy because of our food that's made in a lab. Now, here's the real kicker. So, on top of finding alternatives to real food, like butter to hydrogenated oils, or frying something in lard from an animal to hydrogenated oils, on top of that, when the US government changed the restrictions around nicotine products, a lot of the nicotine marketers were out of a job. So they just transferred that way of thinking, or that way of programming people to make purchases into lab made food, because the lab made food has a long shelf life and there is a huge ROI on it because it's made with bits and pieces of real food. And just like anything, the real ones are more expensive than fake ones, right? So now we're stuck in this conundrum that we want to lose weight, we want to get healthy, we want to feel better about ourselves. And side note, when you stop eating all the highly processed food, you actually do just naturally start to feel better about yourself because you're not full of a bunch of toxins. So on top of the toxic load, the marketers have figured out, or the lab creators of this fake food have figured out how to make it highly addictive. They're called excitotoxins. And I remember hearing the word excitotoxins when I was still in high school. And I remember thinking about it and deciding if I was going to eat Lay's potato chips. Because what happened was I came across some article, or I don't even know how I got to it. But I remember then being presented with the bag of potato chips, and I'm reading the ingredients, and I'm like, there are excitotoxins in this so that my brain will get really excited eating the food and then want more of it. And then there's ways that they change the food to have a really rich smell, to have a certain texture, to have more of a crunch. Like, have you looked at a Dorito lately? It's like thin nothingness. Like there's that's not a tortilla chip. That's not a flour, cornmeal, salt, fried in butter tortilla chip. That's not real, right? So a lot of these foods are manufactured for large consumption so that we can just get them down really easily. Like water molecularly weighs more than soda, which is one of the reasons why it makes soda so easy to drink. And a lot of people are resistant to drinking water. And I'd love for you to experiment with that. Like swish around some water in your mouth and swish around some soda and see if you can feel the difference in weight. So if we have all of this going against us, I want you to reframe why it is that you can't stick with eating healthy, because these foods, the food manufacturers have figured out how to make it addictive in the emotional reward center, aka dopamine, to keep us coming back for more. It is designed to keep us coming back for more. And I'll let you in on a little secret. I've been experimenting with GLP-1s. I did a semi-glutide under the tongue for like over a month, maybe 2 months. Now I have switched to a terzepatide compound because the terzepatide, which is the ingredient that's in like Wegovy and Zepbound, it actually has all these hormonal restorative qualities to it. Growing brain cells, growing heart tissue, reversing pancreatic cancer in some studies. But it also dampens the reward center in the brain. And so, in addition to slowing down the gastric emptying of your food so that you absorb more nutrition, that's the purpose of slowing the stomach, is to allow you more time to absorb nutrition. But it's also changing the brain. And that's different with terzepatide in particular. So, what happens? People's addictive personality traits are subsiding: shopping, drinking, smoking, not just food. And so for me personally, I am like, hell yes, let's all of us, especially in America, get on a compounded terzepatide microdosing, because we need to have some sort of a match to how toxic our environment is. It is hard to get real food. It is hard to get animals, and it's expensive to get animals that don't have a bunch of hormones in them. It is challenging to get healthy food these days, which is so unfortunate. And so if you can think about it in this way, right? Like if you're going to try a terzepatide or a semaglutide, that's great, microdose, so that you have the longevity effects of it. but then also have in the back of your head, hey, like, sister, like, give yourself a pat on the back. You're not horrible. You don't have bad willpower. You're not a terrible person. You're not bad. You are not undeserving of whatever it is that you think that you're going to get once you get to your goal weight. You are living in a toxic environment. And so when you change that perspective, you can be a little bit easier on yourself. And this is really like inner child reparenting in action. These are the conversations that you have to have with yourself. That if you can really look at yourself as a child who is so heartbroken because she's not fitting into maybe her more athletic looking friends. Maybe her friends do gymnastics and they are very muscular, and your daughter is a little bit chubby and she's already been indoctrinated that fat on your body makes you unworthy. How would you talk to her? Especially if she was smart, like age appropriate. Hey, babe, I'm sorry, but like a lot of our food is grown in a lab. And unfortunately, a lot of schools have that same fake food. And so we're actually dealing with things that happen in our brain, not so much our hunger. Couldn't you say that? Right? So these are the things that you need to consider when you're being really hard on yourself. Diet culture and how it's stolen our love of eating. I love this part. So, in my studies of the goddess religion, I read several books from archaeological perspective, anthropology, religious, because it was a goddess religion. It was a belief in God as a woman, because we were the ones who gave life. And we could bleed without dying every single month, and men could not do that. So long ago, the belief in God or the higher power was actually goddess. And as civilization evolved to be less instinctual, less communal, where there is no individuation within the tribe, everybody is considered one. As consciousness was developed, and as people were like slowing their roll and not acting so much on instinct, and as people were kind of asserting themselves and seeing themselves as a separate being, that's when the masculine culture really started to develop. And then that's when society broke apart, where like, this is the easiest way to think about how the patriarchy started. Okay. Women would raise the children in groups. Men would just inseminate. Men did not have a role in raising children. And there are like the analytical psychology, like the analysis of it was basically like, if the men are going out hunting and the women stay local and they're taking care of the kids, and the men have no say in what's happening in the next generation. They only had a say in like the boys, as the boys were coming of age and do the rites of passage so that they could be warriors or they could be hunters, so they could provide for the tribe. But what also started to happen is, because the men were seeing how women kind of had a secret society with the child rearing and the decision making, they were like, well, we want our own secret society. And so then they factioned off into create their groups where women weren't allowed. And I honestly think that it's just human nature that maybe men were a little bit jealous. You guys get to bleed and you don't die. We're out here on the field dying for you, but you get to bleed and not die. How do you do that? You get to have a baby. You get to make new life. How do you do that? You are affiliated with God. I want to be affiliated with God. And so then religion started to change to where the goddess religion had different deities and spirit animals and totems, and the wind was a spirit and the sky was a spirit. And there were all these separate deities of how you actually were interacting with the life experience. And women kind of fell into a category since the primary belief in God was goddess. And then with the evolution of consciousness, with the masculine energy, then it became making a masculine god. And then the tribes in the Fertile Crescent had their own mascots. We know this with the 12 tribes of Judah. And then we know that pretty much one God won for Judaism and Christianity, and then another God kind of won for the religion of Islam. So that's how we got to where we are, okay? Um, and I'm sharing this with you because part of the goddess culture, and still in a lot of non-westernized cultures, food is, or like more like indigenous cultures that are still more tribal living, like in huts or stuff like that. Um, Food is related to the feminine energy. Well, the goddess religions, there was a very strong affiliation with vegetation, with agriculture, with the earth, and there was a symbiotic relationship between what you were giving to the earth and the reverence that you had for what she was providing. So praying over the animal that you killed, blessing it to your body, and and having ceremonies in appreciation for the earth, aka the mother goddess of the earth, of Gaia, so that she would produce sustenance, vegetation, vegetables and fruits and stuff. And so if we just put food into a category of a means to an end, I'm going to eat this way for 3 months, I'm going to lose my weight, then I can go back to how I'm eating now. That doesn't work, and that mechanizes food. And I've definitely been that person where I'm like, I just want food for fuel. I'm like, especially in my macro tracking and anti-inflammatory days. I had to have that mindset to heal my GI tract. But if we have that mindset with food that it's a mechanic, then what it's doing is it's perpetuating the culture that we're already in, where we are so separate from spirit. There is practically zero connection to earth, to nature, to the elements, to our feelings, to our bodies. And so if you start to look at food as a mechanic, that is your like red flag to be like, I'm headed down entropy, where energy has fulfilled all that it could create and it's kind of like folding in on itself. That's where we're at right now in society. So if you can flip your mind instead of, I have to eat this and I hate eating it, into how can I make something as tasty as possible? How can I create joy in my life with the food? And that's a difficult thing to do, especially when we have been trying to stop emotional eating. Because the emotional eating means that that we're eating to feel better, essentially, or we're eating to suppress the feelings. But if we're eating to feel better, and I'm telling you to create joy with what you're eating, that doesn't mix, right? Because you're like, aren't I using food to joy? And I'm not supposed to do that. I'm supposed to get my joy fulfilled somewhere else. Yeah, if you're like depending on food to give you joy at all times, which is most likely just part of the addictive mechanism, the reward system in the brain has nothing to do with the actual experience of food. It's purely chemical and mechanical at that point. So what would it be like if you were like for me, like my one of the waiters that we go to this restaurant and he kind of shouts from across the room, "You're doing the happy dance." Because the food comes and I'm like, "Oh my God, this looks so good." I'm like so excited about what I'm eating. But on the flip side, I'm also having a 500-calorie shake made with 16 ounces of protein, 16 ounces of egg whites, pasteurized egg whites, plus a scoop of meal replacement, so that I know, like right in that one sitting, I'm at like 77, 85 grams of protein. So I'm eating in balance with what do I actually need for my cells and for my health, and then where can I actually have the experience of consumption, which is sustenance from the universe, just tying me even more into being in a supportive, loving universe. How could I create that? Same thing with my donuts. We go to the donut shop and they're like, "Hey, hi, how are you guys doing?" And then the girls know that they look for the crispiest, flattest apple fritter because I love them crispy. And even one time I was like, "Oh, that one." And she goes, "No, no, 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 that's too squishy for you." I'm like, "Oh my God, I love that you know me." So you can have joy in these foods. You don't have to use them to create your joy. You can really value them, especially if you are doing things that are more on the boring side, that are just getting what you need. Reframing food from a source of guilt to a powerful tool for well-being. So many times we feel guilty for what we eat, right? We say, I'm bad, I ate fries, I ate onion rings, I'm never going to get to my results. And we can go into an unconscious spiral. So here's how this works, okay? If food is already historically known to be associated with feminine energy. And feminine energy is the spectrum of intuition and instinct, reactive and response. So if we already know that, okay, perfect. That's what food symbolizes for eons of time. Okay, we got that box covered, okay? So then now we have to go into another box about human conditioning. That in the ages of 0 to 7, meaning 3 months before you are born, your brain is in theta and it's starting to download everything that your little body is experiencing, every single thing. So these are your operating systems. And it's 7 years old when you start to individuate and see a contrast between you and someone else, or what is happening and what you would rather have happening. But what happens with this unconscious programming? That's telling your subconscious how to automate everything. So you could even watch children act like the people that they're around. There was this really cute reel on Instagram of a little like 18-month, 2-year-old boy. I laugh because I'm like, I don't know, like how big are they at what age? He was in diapers and he could walk, but he was wobbly, still babyish. And the reel was that they were laughing that he spent the weekend with his grandpa. And so now when he gets out of his little plastic chair, he grunts because that's what he just learned. That's what life is when you get out of a chair. It's just downloaded. There is no separation between what is being consumed and then what is acted on. So those things last us our whole life because that's how programming is designed for us to operate as an adult. So if you are already feeling bad and already judging yourself and you're like, Lauren's talking about eating apple fritters, I'm eating a donut at least once a week. You're hearing that and you're like, I thought I was supposed to get rid of all junk food to have results. No, you're supposed to have primarily a healthy lifestyle with some shit here and there because, it tastes good. So if you feel guilty for eating an apple fritter or your French fries or your onion rings, that thought is going to start running all the programs in your unconscious that match guilt, doing something wrong, not good enough, too much. Those are all going to come in. And why the inner child work ends up being so important is because if we are being raised, hopefully you're being raised by somebody, you're learning how to fit into the family unit and you're learning how to fit into society. Don't pick your nose, don't scratch your butt in public. Okay, great. Well, a lot of times, the way that we are instructed how to be in the family and how to be in society is criticism. And a lot of times that criticism does not come with an explanation or redirection instead of criticism, or criticism plus here's what we do instead of that. So if we hear a criticism in those ages of 0 to 7, or criticism is happening around us, TV, radio, social media, whatever, other adults interacting, we hear the tone, we see the look on the face, we experience the emotions that are in the room. That's what's supposed to be happening. So your little body from 0 to 7 could actually be getting anxious and feeling like a bad person because that's what got downloaded. So now, because you felt guilty over an apple fritter, French fries, or onion rings, because you felt guilty, you had the thought turned on all the gears from 0 to 7 of criticism to fit into family, to fit into society. Now you're actually operating, now you're actually operating with, I was gonna say other people's shit. You're operating based on whatever you learned that is in the same frequency of guilt. Doesn't that suck? And then to get out of it, what do? We hit the dopamine reward center. We probably consume more or consume something to feel better. So if you looked at food as fun, as joy, as well-being, I'm like chugging my shake and I'm like, this isn't that fun to drink, but it's not that bad. And I'm getting a lot of my needs met very quickly. Okay. And then when I go to lunch, I don't feel bad about having fries. I don't feel bad about having a burger. None of it. I just don't feel bad about it. But I'm also not eating a ton of it. My mom and I were already splitting lunches before I started experimenting with GLP-1s. Okay. Simple shifts to unlock a growth relationship with food. If you have not had light bulbs go off yet, you must not have been paying attention, or you must be really blocked and really fucking hate yourself because I was telling you so many things from different perspectives to see like what is going to land in your body, what really makes sense to tap into your unconscious mind so that you can really start to look at food differently. So here's what I suggest you do. Whatever your protocol is. So if you're a yo-yo dieter, meaning if you are starting your diet every Monday and by Thursday it's fallen apart, keep up with that. If you are someone who sticks with dieting for 3 months at a time, loses 20 pounds, then slowly gains the weight back for 4 or 5 months, then you're like, oh shit, I better go on a diet again. If you're doing that kind of yo-yo dieting, keep doing it, because what I want you to do is when you are observing you being good, so we're going to use terms to speak the same language as the culture, because the culture is about how do you show up society. You don't pick your nose, you don't scratch your butt in public. Okay, that's culture, right? Do not do. You are bad if you do this. So we're going to use good and bad terms. So when you're feeling good about yourself, when you're feeling accomplished, when you're feeling worthy, when you're feeling like you can conquer the world because you're being disciplined, I want you to really notice what your mindset is about everything, like whatever comes up, relationships, the environment, politics, money. Like really get into like how much of an elated, positive feeling do I have right now while I'm being good? And what does that mean about me? What am I making it mean about me? Because that's not necessarily bad information to get. I'm not saying that time in the diet is bad, but what is it giving to you? Because that, what you're giving to yourself by being in that mode is actually more of like the father figure of discipline, of authority, of good job. This is how you should be doing things. Like I think about that all the time, like with dating, where I'm like, if I had a different type of father, what would he say if I said how I was treated, how I was picked up? And if I had a father who was like more centered and grounded and had already done his inner work, how would he have told me as a teenager I should be treated? Oh, okay. So let me imagine that. So what I'm saying is that you can relate it to, you can understand that that's the archetype that you're dealing with. And so when you're feeling that way, you're like, okay, like I'm in really good, positive, masculine energy. This is awesome. Because achievement, worth, value, order, structure, authority, discipline, boundaries, that's all masculine. So good. That's amazing. However, back to the beginning of society, that masculine energy is what creates culture. And it's also based on suppression, especially if it's moving away from the matriarchy, which has a range of instinct to intuition, so reaction to response, and also has communal. There's no individuation within the tribe. What goes for one goes for all. There's no my body, my choice in that situation. So if we follow this line of thinking of evolutionary psychology, then what happens when that positive masculine authority, discipline, boundaries, blah, 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 starts to wear off? What happens when you start to get emotionally exhausted from like the hype girl phase of sticking with a diet? What happens when you do have a bad day and you're like, I would really use some comfort food right now? What happens when you start to PMS? Because those all fit into the category of feminine, which the masculine's job is to suppress and to control and to confine. So you've been dieting, start on Monday, falls apart on Thursday, dieting for 3 months, you take 3 to 4 months to gain the weight back, you start your diet again. That scenario. So as you're starting to feel yourself need to give in to this feminine energy, now what is coming up? What emotions are you feeling and what are you making it mean about you? You're not good enough. You're not doing a good job. You should be able to stick with this. You're not going to get to your goal. And if you don't get to your goal, then you're not going to get the thing that you've been fantasizing about having when you get your goal. Okay, perfect. Because guess what? Those feelings, whatever it is that you do with them, there's two things that are in those feelings: your ego and your shadow. Your shadow is the parts of yourself that you have not identified, primarily your 0 to 7 programs from a whole bunch of other influences that aren't even you, just living in your body, or your ego, to protect the hurt feelings that go along with that shadow criticism. So now that you're at the end, like where you're starting to sabotage and you're identifying these feelings, then it's like your ego is going to say, screw the man, screw diet culture. I'm going to eat whatever I want. I'm beautiful no matter what. Or it's going to go into, it's never going to work anyway. Why should I even try? That's your shadow. And then you start eating. Isn't that what happens? Or your ego is like, it's the weekend. If you're somebody who starts every Monday, it's the weekend. I should be able to eat whatever I want. And then you just start eating and eating and eating. And then you continue eating on Sunday night and you're not even hungry so that you can start again on Monday. And then now you're up 6 pounds again. And then it takes until Wednesday to get that weight off. And then you're already starting to crash on Thursday because you were so strict Monday through Wednesday. Like, you know the deal, right? So if you're looking at how you're feeling and what you're making it mean when you're in your power and you're on the beginning phases of that diet, that's your masculine energy. Perfect. Write that shit down. When you're starting to wane, when you're starting to feel depleted, that's your feminine energy. Write down what you're feeling and what you're making it mean about you. And see if you can notice what you do. If you go shadow into eating because you already feel bad, like, what's the use? You're not good enough anyway. Or if you go to ego and rebellion and you get angry at diet culture, it's going to tell you so much about your unconscious energy. So when you do that, then what's able to happen is you can like dampen. I love the word dampen now. You can dampen the need to go so hard in your diet. Because if you think about it now, if you're like, wow, yeah, I had all these positive emotions when I was in the beginning of my diet, that they started to get negative. Well, what if you kind of just like leveled the playing field a little bit and noticed how great you are consistently, not just when you're on that high, and you take that information that you wrote down to remind yourself when you start to really lose steam. You're like, okay, wait, let me check in. Have I been sleeping? Is my period starting? Did I have something really stressful happen? How many calories have I been eating? Am I under dieting? Then you can kind of like assess like real life. And then once those are all checked off, I used to do this all the time, check in, like, and then I'm like, well, okay, like if all my needs are met, then right, because sometimes you're like, oh, I am under eating. Let me go chug a protein shake and a banana. Oh, I feel much better now. Like, there's things like that. But then if you check off, I've got my sleep, I've got my water, I'm eating, there's nothing stressful happening in my life. It was a great day. There's zero problems. I'm not PMSing. Then you're like, okay, well, then this is just me. This is just my unconscious energy that's ready to be processed. Okay, well, perfect. Now, how do I feel? I feel sad. I feel disappointed. Okay, why? Well, because the weight's not coming off fast enough. Why do you need it to come off super fast? Well, because all of the before and after pictures, when people have transformations in a short amount of time, that means that like they really did it. Like, man, like they've got something in them that I don't have. And if I could do that, then I can prove that I have that same thing. Most of those before and after pictures are lighting and changing how people are standing and sucking in their stomach. Like, that's it. So when you're like, okay, now I can actually assess my energy. I've got my positive list from when I'm on my high. I've already done my check-in and what's going on in real life. Okay, I feel this way because it's just how I'm feeling in this moment. How exactly am I feeling? And what do I make it mean about me? And then bonus, when was the last time I felt this way? And you go to that memory, rework that information. When was the time before that that I felt that way? And the time before that, the time before that. And you can start to unwind yourself down to ages 0 to 7. And they could be just like little random pieces of memories. Like right now, my head just went to being in primary school and we had that rectangle pizza. I don't have any emotion tied to it, but like that's where my head went. So like you could find yourself on the elementary school playground at a basketball game in middle school and be like, huh, because maybe with that memory coming up, it actually has a same emotional like component to it. So then you're like, oh, like, well, what happened there? Okay, let me think about that. What was going on? What was happening in my life? Who was I around? What was the friend group? What were my parents' friend group? Oh, okay. You can kind of start to like go into yourself. This is the whole going inside. And then that way you start to really like actually legitimately balance your energy to where you're not so far into authority, discipline, boundaries, sticking with it, and you're not so far into I'm never going to get any results. And then your approach to diet and to food becomes much more neutral and matter of fact so that you kind of know like okay well there's food that really gets me to my goal and there's food that doesn't really, so let me make sure I'm eating mostly food that gets me to my goal and let me really enjoy the food that isn't really going to get me to my goal but it tastes really good, like the cronuts, the donuts, the apple fritter, all those things. So that is how you get to moderate eating. I remember when I would hear other fitness professionals talk about moderate eating, I was like, I don't know how you get that. I'm just like all or nothing. And but that's how you do it. Like it is a little bit of extensive because you do have to take the time to actually feel yourself, but wouldn't it be easier to take a couple months, if you can commit to 3 months of tracking macros and getting into the leanest shape of your life, if you can dedicate that much time to your meal prep and boundaries around your time and not doing a lot of social things that aren't going to fit your macros, you could do this. You would actually have less restriction with doing the emotional work because as you do the emotional work, you compound the interest just like a bank. So the first time that you learn how to assess your feelings and write things down and then reflect, the next time you do it, it's easier. The time after that, it's easier. It gets easier and easier and easier because you develop it as a skill. So then eventually, there's no more starting on Mondays. You're just eating moderately. That's what I want to share with you. And then now I want to invite you to the Fat Life because round 2 starts on September 8th. And this is the exact work that we are doing in the Fat Life. And I am there with you every step of the way. And round 2 is going to be even more extensive because I'm going to be doing weekly trainings. You could always catch the replay. That's like not a problem. And I'm also going to sell them for like 22 bucks, 33 bucks in case there's a topic that you really want to do, but you don't really feel like you're ready to fully commit to yourself. The program is $222 a month. You go to laurensarcione.com to sign up for it. There are some VIP premium gifts for the first 3 women to sign up. So even though it's not September 8th, you can still sign up now. We officially start day 1 on September 8th, but if you sign up now, you can kind of get your feet wet, take a look at the program, write me some messages on the wall, get to know, you could kind of get to know the curriculum a little bit before we fully start so that you can get the premium upgrades. The premium upgrades are either a week in Telegram where you have me in your pocket once a month, or you could opt for hour-long, like technically 50-minute one-on-one sessions, 3 of those throughout the container. So you could do a 50-minute one-on-one Zoom session for fitness, for energy work, whatever it is that you want to cover, astrology or human design, whatever it is you want to cover, inner child, but you have to already be in the program. You have to be one of the first 3 women to sign up at that $222. After this round, the price is going to go up again. And when you sign up for whatever rate that we're currently at, you get to keep that for the rest of the year. And the rest of the year in my world is the astrological year. So March 20th is actually when you get to hold on to this pricing, because the new year is actually in Aries season, because Aries is the first sign of the zodiac. So that's all I have for you today. Again, if this was helpful for you, share this. And on September 8th, I will put you in the drawing for either my mug or my branded water bottle. And when you share, just make sure that you tag me at aligned and hot. Yeah, aligned and hot with Lauren on Instagram or facebook.com/ Lauren Sercione Body Energetics with an X. And those links are going to be in the comments to this video on YouTube and Facebook so that it's easy for you to share.